Welcome to episode 11 of Missile Command. Today, pretty exciting, we're going to actually make a couple of tweaks to the library that we created last time with our targeted object, so it's ready to be used in our Missile Command, and then we're actually going to start the Missile Command game itself. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do is that in our target object, we referred to this canvas object is actually down in our program down here. And in order for this to be useful when we're using it as a library, we need to have the target object know the canvas it wants to be on. So we're going to define a canvas object that right now I'll just default to nothing and it won't work. And then we'll assign it when we do it. I'll show you that in a minute. And then the other thing which we need is in our video game, we're going to have a missile that's going to be shooting up and it's going to interact with other shapes on the canvas. And so what we need is we need a dictionary that given a shape on the canvas, we need to map it to the object that it is, the self, if you will. And so that is actually going to be a dictionary. And so we're going to fill that dictionary up when we create an object. And where we're going to do that is in here when we create in this init function, when we're given the starting and ending points and we've got the list of objects, we're going to actually keep track. So what we're going to just say is for the object in objects, for each of the shapes on the canvas or a line or an image, we're going to remember that the targeted object dot shape to self, we've got the canvas item, the canvas ID, as one of the objects that was passed in that we'd already drawn on the canvas before we start moving it. And we just want to set that equal to self, which is the memory pointer to all the information about this object. So if we have a shape, a line on the canvas, and we have it inside of a circle, for example, we can see that line in the circle, we can determine what is it, what object did it come from. So that's very important. Now, because we've defined this canvas as an attribute of all targeted objects, it's not by each one, but it's shared by all of them. What we need to do is we need to replace everywhere, I'm going to do a Control F, say canvas, and everywhere the word canvas exists, okay, I need to change it, not this one, because this is actually where we're pointing at it, but this now needs to be changed to self.canvas, okay? Because we're now referring instead of a global variable for the canvas, we actually have a canvas pointer in all of the targeted objects. So we want to do that. We want to do that here. We want to do that here. And so we're pointing to the object. And then what we need to do down here, after we create the canvas, we need to say, oh, by the way, hey, targeted object, we want your canvas to be pointed at the canvas we just created. So this canvas is in the local context, and we want to point target object at that canvas. And so now each object knows the canvas should be drawn on, and so everything works when we use it in the next level up when we're pointing at this as a library. The other thing we need to do to clean this up is we made this code sitting here inside this if function, but all these variables end up being, when you include it as a library, they get stuck in the context in the where we're using this library. So we wanted to define this as the main function, right? Just as main with no arguments. And then we want to shift all these lines over by select them all, hitting the tab key. That makes them all part of this main function. Oops. Including all the way down here. Let's tab these over only once. And then that is the definition and I hit shift tab to come back out. So this is now a function, so it won't contaminate, these lines and variables won't contaminate what's above it. And then down here, we'll call the main function when we actually run this code. So if we did that properly, when I hit the run button here, everything should just work like it did before. I'll make the canvas a little bigger. When I click, sure enough, I get my missiles coming up, or my targeted objects. Wherever I click, I go from the starting point to the ending point, and I can make as many of them as I want. So now we're ready to now use this. We've cleaned this up, so we're ready to use our library. We're actually going to start making the Missile Command video game. So let's do that. All right. So let's get started making our Missile Command game. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over here to the items on the side. We're going to right-click and say New Python file. And we're going to call this Missile Command. So we're actually going to make the Missile Command program that I showed you a whole bunch of episodes ago. So now we've got an empty library, an empty file. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, from mylib I want you to import everything we did. That's going to be helpful. And then we want to say on my window is equal to TK. So we're going to get a TK window. And then we want to set the window geometry. And what we want to do here is we want to set the window geometry, in this case, to 1500 pixels wide by 980 tall. And we're going to offset it on the screen by 90 and 42. And if this doesn't work for you exactly, you can slide around. But this will give us, we've got an image we want to fit on there. And so that's going to give us a good size window to have the game on. And then we want to say, look, in this case, the window that we're drawing, in the past we allowed it to move. But in this case, we don't want it to do that. We don't want it to move in X or in Y. And so we're now going to say this window can't be resized. And then, of course, we're going to need a canvas, which we always need, VAS. And in this case, we're going to set the width is going to equal 1500, which is the size that we had in X up here. And the height is going to equal 900, which is, so the whole window size we're going to take up with the canvas. Okay? And now we have to remember to put the canvas in the window. So we got to pack it in the window. So now it's in the window. And then we're going to say, look, our target object, canvas, is equal to the canvas we just created. Okay? So now any targeted object that we use is going to know where the canvas is. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to define a background. And the background is going to be a photo image. And we're going to point that photo image up here on background.gif. And so what that is that is file equals images and sound slash dot GIF. And another tick mark and an end parentheses. So we're going to end up taking this image that I gave you before you should download, the background.gif, right? And we're going to make that a photo image so we can use it as the background. And then we're going to say, hey, canvas dot create image. And we're going to say that this should be placed at 0, 0. Remember, that is the upper left-hand corner. The image is going to be equal to background. And we want to anchor it. We want the anchor where we place it at 0, 0 to be the northwest corner. Okay? And then we're going to end up having down at the bottom, we're going to end up with our normal main loop. Main loop. And that should give us a program we can actually run. So let's go ahead and right here and run Missle command. So, I've got a double equal sign. You guys didn't yell at me for the double equal sign, but Python did. Let's try that again. Oh, look at that. So we have a big screen, a big canvas. We've got a drawing here my grandson made with some mountains in it and some grass in the front. And we've got a location here where we're going to actually have a place to launch missiles from. So the next thing we need to do is, if you look at all these images over here, notice that there's 3 buildings. There's building 1, building 2, and building 3. And there's a rubble 1 and rubble 3. We don't have a rubble 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy rubble 1. We're going to copy it. And then we're going to paste it in. And it's going to be called rubble 2 because we don't have a rubble 2. So now I have rubble 1, rubble 2, and rubble 3. That was necessary because in the code it makes it a lot easier. 3 buildings and 3 rubbles, and you'll see how that works. So the next thing we're going to do after we create the image and place it in the background is that we're going to actually get these buildings ready to be imported, okay? And so the way we're going to do that is we're going to define an array of buildings and another array of rubble that is going to be equal to 2 lists. So that gives us building and rubble are 2 empty lists. And then for the variable b, which is going to be in the range of 1 to 4, which means it will be the value 1, 2, and 3, we are going to add a building, append, and what we're going to append is a photo image where the file is from images and sounds. In this case, it's going to be building, end with a quote. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say, look, add the string B. So that's going to add the string B at the end. And then we're going to add, let's put another space around this to make it easier to read. And then we're going to add the string .gif. So what that's going to do is it's going to say, it's going to append to this array of buildings first building 1, because it's the file name is building 1. So we add the 1 to the building, and then it's going to do 2, and then it's going to do a 3. And then what we want to do is we want to do the same thing, but now what we want to do is we want to do rubble append this whole thing. But instead of building, it's going to be rubble. So we're going to end up with a list of 3 buildings in an array that are already ready to be used because they're photo image converted, and a bunch of rubble. Okay? So that gives us the objects that we now want to place, the buildings we want to place on the canvas. Now, what we're going to do is up here, after we create the canvas, we're going to actually do something which is super powerful in Python, which is that we're going to inherit all the properties of a targeted object by creating a class called building with a capital B that is a targeted object. And so what happens is when you do that, I'm creating a class. I said call, I meant class. I'm creating a class called building that inherits everything of a targeted object. Okay? And so what we can do is we can define a new underscore init function, which is going to just be given a starting location, because the building just has a starting location. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a building, and we're going to do that by inside this initialization function. We're saying, look, the building number is going to be random range. That should be a dot. Random range between 0 and 3, because that's the index into the array. Remember, arrays, we made these arrays. This was building 1 to 3, but the array starts at 0. So it's going to be 0 to 2. The 3 it'll never get to. So we're going to pick a random number between 0 and 2 to pick the building. And then we're going to say, look, for the self.canvas, we want to create an image, okay, where we want to start at the first point, start at 0, and we at 0 start at X location, and then the start at the Y location. So we have the location where we're going to place the image. Okay, we're going to use image is going to be equal to rubble of the number B. Okay, and in this case, we want to anchor that object on the bottom, on the south end of the object. So we're going to put the building, we're going to place it on the ground, and it'll stick up in the air. So we use to anchor the rubble on the ground, and we're going to draw that first. Okay, and then we're going to create the building as self.canvas dot create image again. Okay, this time we're going to actually use the same thing, but it's actually going to be a building instead of the rubble. And because we drew the rubble first, it's going to be behind the building. So when we put building in here, building B. So we've got the same number for rubble and building. We're going to anchor it on the south. So when we do that, we've drawn on a canvas, right, where we want the building, and the rubble's going to be placed first, and the building's going to be placed on top of it. Both are going to be sticking up in the air. And so now what we need to do is that we need to say, look, I want the target. I want the place that I want this building to move to is going to basically be start of 0 and start of 1, the y direction. And then what I want to do is I would like to add to that building B, and I want to get its height. So building, it's a canvas, a thing drawn on the canvas, and so I want to get its height. And so what I'm going to happen is this object is going to start placed on the ground. It's got a height. It's going to be sticking up. And the target, remember, we can make it move with the targeted object. We're going to move it from where it was. We're going to move it down by the height of the object. So it looks like the building is falling. Okay? And then what we know have a target. We have a starting location because we were given the starting location. We have a target. It's start plus the vertical change in the y-axis. And now what you do is you do a super, which is calling the init function of the targeted object, which is the one that is, we inherited all the properties of it. So now we want to call its init function, given it the start, given it the target, okay? And in this case, we want to set the distance to, it's going to move slowly. We're going to set the distance to 5, and we're going to set the delay that we defined in the targeted object, we're going to set that to 50. Okay? And then the other thing is there's an auto start. And we want that to set to false. We don't want the building to start moving right away. Now, because we have nothing else in the game and we want to see what's going to happen, is what we're going to do is we're going to cheat right now. We're going to say, look, in self.canvas, after, and now we're going to say is random range between 5 seconds, which is 5,000 milliseconds, and 20,000 milliseconds, right? Somewhere in that range, between 5 seconds and 20 seconds, we want to say, hey, look, call the function self.move. So what that means is once the game starts up, is between 5 and 20 seconds, the buildings will randomly start to move. And so we can see what's actually going to happen. Now, so we've created the building through using all the properties of a targeted object. It's going to take all the functions, all the moving, everything. We just modified the init function a little bit to define the buildings and created our own target by moving it in Y, so we don't have to do that. And then we're going to call the target object. This super function basically says we're calling target object.init function. And so it's going to do everything that we did when we created a target object. So it's going to do everything it did. It's going to set everything all up to move or not move. It's going to be beautiful. Now, so the only thing that we have to do is that down here, we need to put in the buildings. So what we're going to say is for X, that's an X, for X in the range zero to 15,000, which is what's along the x-axis. Remember, we're 15,000 pixels wide. So 0 to 15,000. Every 100 pixels. So we're going to say my building is equal to, we're going to create a building, which we're going to call this building class. We're going to create a building, okay? And we're going to say, look, the building should be wherever X was. And what we want to do is we want to place it at 900, which is the bottom of the screen, minus 60 pixels. Okay? So let's give that a try. So I'm going to hit run here, Missile command, and let's see what happens. I didn't put a double dots on the end here. That's why it's not happy. Okay, my building takes start position, and the start position is a tuple. And I forgot to put parentheses around this. It looked like it had 2 arguments instead of 1 that's a tuple. So let's try that. Oh, see how this thing is highlighted? Yeah, this should be rand range, not random. I think you'll find that that works a lot better. Can't type rand range. All right, let's run it. Oh, and this is in line 12, rand range. They're both rand ranges. I typed them both wrong. Rand range and rand range. So we're going to pick a random number here and a random number there. Let's see what happens. Oh. Init missing 1 required positional argument objects. So this init function takes a start, takes a target, and then it takes a list of things that we're going to draw. And so we have drawn a building. So we have to give it a list of things that we're going to have the move, right? And this list has just got a single thing in it, building in it, which is why it is upset. I forgot to pass the building that we drew on the canvas, this image that we drew. I forgot to add it to the list when we created the target object, so it wasn't going to run. Let's try it again. Well, look at that. So we've got buildings. They're all sitting in here. Oh, and look, randomly, they start to move. Now, in our video game, we won't move them until they get hit by a ship. But you can see that they actually move. So that's cool. It looks like they're falling down. There's a couple problems, though. There's building in front of our missile launcher. So let's fix that. And also, the fact that they move, let's hide them. So when they're moving, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So what we're going to do is, first thing that we're going to do is we're going to put in here, when we create the buildings, let's put in an if x is less than 700 or x is greater than 800. Then we're going to add a building. So that will leave us no buildings between 700 and 800x. Let's see if that worked. So we want to leave an opening. Oh, I meant or, but I said of. So now we aren't putting buildings where the missile launcher is. That's kind of nice. And again, they should start moving randomly after 5 to 20 seconds. You can see the two, but we don't want to see them sliding off the page. So what we're going to do is, so here we've placed all the buildings. What we're going to do is we're going to create a rectangle that's green, and we're going to position it down where the bottom of the missiles are, bottom of the buildings are. So watch what happens. Now there's a green rectangle drawn on the screen. You can see it down here at the bottom. And so what happens is when the buildings start to move, that doesn't look like they're sliding off the page. And then the leaves behind the rubble that we already drew. So now we're getting pretty close. That's starting to look like the video game. So let's stop for now, and we'll add the missiles and the ships next time.